So I lead a project called Saving Devon's Treescape. It is led by Devon Wildlife Trust on behalf of the Devon Ash Dieback Resilience Forum. It's a really big project and there's lots of different things going on. We've only got a few minutes today, so I'm going to give you the abbreviated version of it. And I've been asked to particularly focus on what community groups and parish councils can do. But there's going to be a whole host of things that I'm missing out. So if you want to look at other things, then it's all on our website, but I'll give you, just an overview to begin with. So as the name Devon Ash Dieback Resilience Forum implies, the project has come about due to ash dieback. So ash trees are amazing trees. They're all across our countryside. They have a huge impact on our landscape. We have an estimated 1.9 million mature ash trees outside of woodland across Devon. That's not including any that are younger or any that are in woodlands. So they're our second most common tree outside of woodlands across Devon. So everywhere you look, you will find one. It's kind of one of those things that if you haven't spotted them before, once you get your eye in, you then can't stop spotting them. They're all along our roads as you drive along. They're in our urban areas, they're in our rural areas. They're a fantastic tree. They host so much biodiversity and wildlife. And they're a huge part of our heritage in Devon in particular. So I've just told you how great they are, but now the bad news is that sadly they're being affected by ash dieback. So a fungal disease that came across, I can never remember, I think it's 2012, but I'm sure some of you can correct me, over from Asia, and is sadly affecting our ash trees. So up to 90% are due to be affected in the current coming years, which is going to just have an absolutely massive effect on our landscape. It's going to really change the way it looks, the way wildlife and biodiversity is supported. It's hard to imagine when you look out across Devon how that will be impacted just by the sheer volume of ash trees that will be affected. It's going to be devastating, and hopefully this project can provide a bit of hope towards that sadness that we're going to feel with the loss of them. Just to say, we don't advocate for ash trees to be chopped down if they're not posing a threat to life. So hopefully a lot will remain useful and in our landscape, but they just won't be full of life like they have been for many years. So just a bit of background on the Saving Devon's Treescape project. As you can see, we've got a lot of funders and a lot of partners. It's a fantastic project. I think I spotted Adam from South Devon OMB on the call, so they're one of our partners as well. And South Devon is actually one of our focus areas of the project, which there are 5 focused areas in total. So we have a focused amount of activity that will happen across South Devon. It's, as I said, as you can tell by the amount of partners, it's a very big project with lots and lots going on, but you're going to get the shortened version today. So our motto for the project is that ash dieback is everyone's problem, but everyone can be part of the solution. So we really are working with every type of stakeholder you can imagine. So individuals, community groups, schools, landowners, farmers, businesses. There is a role for everyone to ensure that our treescapes are diverse and resilient moving forwards. We advocate for the 3-2-1 principle, and that kind of underpins all the work that we do. So for every large ash tree that has to be taken down, we promote that 3 new trees are planted in its place, 2 for a medium and 1 for a small. We're not promoting the replanting of ash trees. Instead, we are looking at UK broadleaf species. So everything from oak, rowan, crabapple, hawthorn, that kind of stuff. And just with that replacement formula, it means that when we're working with landowners and businesses in particular that are having to take those trees down, we're just getting a constant new stream of trees that are being planted in our countryside, so that hopefully we can combat some of the problems that were going to occur due to ash trees coming down. So as I said, I'm going to focus on the offers that are hopefully most relevant to you during this presentation. So I've broken it down into our top 3 ones. So we have our free tree scheme, which is the centerpiece of our project. And this is so that we can get as many trees out to as many people as possible. The project is really focused on trees outside of woodlands. So the smallest planting we'll be doing is 1 single tree in like a back garden. And then the largest we'll be going up to is around 500, which you can imagine about half a hectare. And we'll be doing everything in between. So really focus on that much smaller scale. So that gives me a massive logistical problem to try and get as many trees, single trees, out across our county as possible. And so that's where you wonderful people come in to help me. And so our free tree scheme is where parish councils, communities, schools, any local group can host one of our free tree hubs. And this can be in a library, a garden centre, a school, a community hall, anything that's kind of central within your community. I can then deliver you packs of free trees. So as you'll see in the photo on the left, they come as small whips and they're cell grown, along with the protection, some planting and aftercare guides, some guidance on what tree to plant where. We're obviously advocating for the right tree in the right place, and with the regular and constant aftercare that it'll need to maintain its life. I can deliver all that with you, and you can set up an event and work with local community members to distribute those trees and get them planted out. We did a few of these last year, which we weren't sure how they were going to go, but I supported one in Sidmouth, and we had a queue for 3 hours non-stop with people coming to collect the trees. So it's been really popular and amazing to see the amount of people that really want to make a difference and plant trees. So we also have free fruit trees that we are saving to be planted on public spaces. So it can be a community orchard, for example. So this is somewhere, again, in your community that people can benefit from. They can get the fruit and future years. Community members can work together to ensure that the aftercare is done correctly. So that's another aspect that we can support. And finally, our landmark trees. So these, you can see there the Mayor of Salcombe planting her tree last year. We are aiming to plant one landmark tree in every parish across Devon, which I think is our 300 and something parishes, which is quite a lot. But we really want these, so these are our larger trees, the light standards, and they, again, be a focal point in the community. So somewhere that it can stand big and proud, and people can speak and have education around, and just be a wonderful centerpiece to a community. I've got a twisted oak near me that is, I can't even imagine how old that tree must be. It's absolutely beautiful and everyone speaks about it. So we want to make sure that every community has something like that in their area. Final bit is our free advisory visits to landowners. So if you have lots of landowners in your area that aren't quite sure what to do, how to do it, what's even possible, then that's where we can come in and provide them some free advice. We can attend their land, walk around with them, without them, whatever suits their schedule, and give them advice on the management of their hedgerows, their hedgerow trees, planting copses and what wildlife they have on site that they can support. And then either we can support them through putting in funding applications through things like countryside stewardship, or we can provide the trees through the project as well. Hopefully as well, we can also link them in with local volunteers to provide that tree planting and aftercare support, so that we can start bridging the gap between the landowners and community members as well, and bring them together so that they can make a difference and, yeah, help those trees get the best start to life. So they are the main offers I've given you today. As I said, it's very abbreviated. We also have all sorts of things from our citizen science work, monitoring key species that are affected, will be affected with ash dieback. So we'll be hunting for brown hair streak butterfly eggs this November, looking for lichens, cell bunting. We've got bat detectors out at the moment. I think we've got a hub down in South Devon somewhere. I can't remember where off the top of my head, but there is a hub somewhere down there. We've got walks and talks happening through Woodlands, looking at old folklore around the ash and really ensuring that we remember and treasure the ash tree so it's not forgotten for generations to come. We don't want children growing up not knowing what an ash tree was and what it looked like, which many, like me, I don't remember the elm tree. So yeah, there's a whole host of other activities, but I just wanted to offer you those ones so that you can possibly get some inspiration, and hopefully we can help you, provide you with some trees and get them planted locally to you. So I think that is everything from me.
Well done. Thank you. Thanks, Rosie. I'm sure there might be some questions. So yeah, if either you put your hand up or you raise it up as a reaction, Who's got a question? Peter.
Yes, Rosie, these replacement saplings that you're putting in, are they disease-resistant cultivars, or are you just taking a chance that one of the three will survive?
So we're not planting ash trees, we're planting other species. So we'll be replanting with oak, rowan, crabapple,
So
different species. Yeah. So I think it might even be illegal at the moment, but don't quote me on that, to plant ash trees. So no ash trees should be planted at the moment. Instead, we're looking at different UK broadleaf species.
Yes, but disease-resistant cultivars are being developed, are they not?
It's not something I know masses about, to be honest. It's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
Ross might know more than me.
They are, is the answer to that, but they're not yet available, and they're, I suppose, it's being seen more as ornamental rather than necessarily native species. So, yeah, unfortunately, the palette of species is a bit constrained. But as Rosie said, we would be using the other native broadleaf species, primarily oak.
Robin, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, a question. Rosie, it's a fantastic opportunity for community groups, particularly, to do some tree planting in a locality. So obviously there's an initial work of planting a tree, but what advice would you give to a community group about the longer term aftercare of the trees after they're planted?
Yeah. So when anyone takes away a free tree from our hub, we have a booklet available to them with planting and aftercare advice within it. So we've listed everything in there that they need to think about. We also ask them to sign a pledge card. And if they give us GDPR rights, it means we can save their details and then get back in touch with them at key points during the year to remind them to do a bit of weeding or give it some water or anything like that. And for some of our larger plantings as well, so anything over 100, we do a land management plan with the landowner, which goes into a lot more detail about that as well. Again, get in touch with landowners. I emailed them last week, in fact, to make sure that some of the weeding was done ahead of the winter season to give those trees the best start to life. And also just come off an event with them. I don't think they're here actually, anyone from Devon County Council, but the Right Place, Right Tree guidance has also been launched today, which is on their website, which you can easily Google and search. And we've supported them with that, which has a fantastic range of advice on what to plant where, but also how to look after it. So we'll be promoting that guidance as well.
Thank you. Thelma, Gillian, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I did. Well, it's just to make sure I've got this right. You said don't cut down the ash tree unless it's a danger to life. Was that correct, Rosie?
Yes, that is what I said. It still has many benefits to our landscape if it can stay in place.
So should we just cut out any of the dead or just leave the whole thing alone?
If it's not going to pose any threat to life, so if it's in a field or something, then you can completely leave it alone.
Right.
Deadwood can provide a fantastic habitat for many animals. So,
yeah, that's super. We've just had a case of that, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thelma.
I know of at least one farmer who's doing exactly that, who's a tree warden as well, who's got a field where he's got quite a lot of ash trees that have died. And he said he's noticed quite a lot of wildlife coming in, you know, sort of woodpeckers and such are using the dead ash trees as homes and that sort of thing. So don't, whatever you do, cut them down. However, if they are dangerous, if they're in a public highway, near a public highway, public bridleway or footpath, they have to come down because they might collapse. And all I was going to say briefly was that we have to learn to love sycamore. Sycamore is one of those species where ash biodiversity moves to once the ash trees are dead. It doesn't take all of them, but it does have a biological role in life now. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Adam wanted to say something, and then Jay West. Sorry, I don't know your first name, but Adam, do you want to go?
Thanks, Jill. I just wanted to say something about there is still hope that we're going to have some mature Chalara resistant trees within the huge number of ash trees that are across this country. Maybe the provenance of those resistant trees might help us in the future, but essentially it's going to be a slow move to us losing this species. And I think Rosie's really right. We shouldn't have really knee-jerk reactions. But based on that resistance, but also moving over to talk about provenance, I want to prompt Rosie to say something about the local nursery, which is growing trees from seed from this very beautiful part of the country that we're in.
Yes. So at the moment, I will say a huge thank you to Woodland Trust, who provide many of our trees, as they're also here. But we have also set up our own community tree nursery. So we currently have one in Meath. And fingers crossed, if we get funding, we'll also have a second one over in Broadcliffe as well. And these will also, all the seed source for those nurseries will come from Devon. So I was actually with Thelma a couple of weeks ago, collecting some from Kingston so that we can make sure that we are getting local tree stock to plant in local areas. And trying to get as much diversity across Devon in particular as well as looking at some key species within Devon that's only here. So the Devon whitebeam, for example. So it's very exciting, but yeah, hopefully we can start growing trees from the specific areas in Devon that we can then plant out in future years to really give it the best chance of life.
Thanks, Rosie. Could you also just mention the micro nurseries as well? Because I think that's a lovely idea to engage young people in schools. Maybe South Devon's got a school that would like one.
Yes, of course. So last year we were able to trial 5 micro tree nurseries within primary schools and secondary schools. So this is where we were able to provide the kits that they needed. So like a raised bed, some propagators, pots, compost, that kind of thing, along with some guidance to go with it of how they can grow some trees from seed. To trial that with 5 schools. I'm waiting to hear how it's gone this autumn. But yeah, fingers crossed that, again, if we get the funding, we'll be able to roll this out further. And I think we'll aim to do another 10 over the next year, but 30 over the next few years. So we are looking for schools or community groups that want to start growing on a small scale their own local trees that they then have homes for locally as well. Then hopefully that is something we'll be able to support in the coming years.
Great. Yeah, I can think of one near us, Tony. Sorry, Jay West first.
Yeah, it's Jenny. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
Jenny.
It's Jenny.
Sorry.
The trees that you're giving away for free, can you point us in the right direction as to where we can get stakes and the cages for them?
Yeah, so we actually provide all the protection to go with the trees.
The
So
whole
we
lot.
give you trees and protection.
Oh, great, thank you.
That's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
is. Thanks.
Question, Tony.
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks, Rosie. And we did get some trees from Rosie this year. We had 2 tree plantings in the village, and they were very successful. And if anyone ever wants to involve the community, tree planting is a really good way of doing it. We had some terrific turnout, so just recommending the Saving Devon's Landscape.
Thank you, Tony. I'd love to see some pictures of where they got planted if you can send them over.
I'll do that. Sorry. Yeah.
No, don't be sorry. I just always love to see where they end up and how they're getting on. So I always ask for photos.
Yeah, I meant to do it, I forgot.
A question's just come through to me that do we want donations? Sadly, we can't take any donations of trees. It's just part of the nursery regulations that we follow. We have to be able to collect all the seeds ourselves, and for every tree that leaves our nursery, I need to be able to trace it back to exactly where that tree was, that seed was collected and what day and everything from it. So I would recommend posting it in your local Facebook group or something instead if you have saplings yourself that you've got, but sadly not something we can take on as part of the project.
Thank you. And Rosie, there's a question in the chat from Peter about the danger of spreading fungus, just cutting down trees and leaving them and not burning them. I don't know if you could comment on that.
Yeah, so the wood from ash trees is absolutely fine to use for its usual purposes. You cannot spread as far as I keep looking at Ross in case he's going to correct me on anything, but he's far more knowledgeable than I am. But you cannot spread ash dieback through the wood. So you can use it for firewood, you can use it to fill things. It's absolutely fine to use for its normal purposes. It's a fungal disease, and so it spreads through the wind and lands on the leaves. So yeah, there is no problem with transporting, moving, or using dead ash wood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, well, brilliant. That was really useful, Rosie. Thank you for telling us all that. Before you go, any last question? Or, I mean, don't go. You're welcome to stay here for the until 3 o'clock when we finish.
So I'll stay. So if any questions come in the chat box, I'm more than happy to answer them. And also you can always email me and I can get back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so it's over to Robin and Ross now. Welcome to you both. Thank you for coming along from the Woodland Trust to talk to us. And over to you.
Thank you. So we haven't quite rehearsed this properly, have we, Robin?
Oh, we have, Ross.
Oh yeah, there we go. So
all worked out.
Jill, if it's okay, could I just do a very quick follow on to Rosie's, very quick, and then I'll pass to Robin to talk about Penstave and the community woods, and then I'll do a little bit of a follow up on the community woods. But yeah. We're really pleased to be here. So yeah, I'm Ross Kennerley. I'm the regional director with the Woodland Trust, but you'll see that I'm actually sitting in the Avon Valley. It's the woods at Loddiswell are behind me here. So I'm actually in the South Hams at the moment and have the pleasure of living here and recognise some faces on this call. So just for context, Woodland Trust is a UK charity, owns over 1,200 woods, but what's of relevance to this discussion is it is a charity that was born and bred and started in the South Hams. 49 years old, it turns 50 next year, but it was started by 2 or 3 individuals in the South Hams, and the very first purchase of a wood for the Woodland Trust is the wood that is behind me in the picture, which is the Avon Valley woods that sit down at Loddiswell. So the South Hams should be very proud for having nurtured and given a start to the Woodland Trust. On saving Devon's treescapes, I just wanted to say that the project that Rosie's leading is probably, from what I've seen, the most comprehensive response to ash dieback in England. So those groups in Devon who've got together should be really pleased with how they've both looked at what will happen when ash goes, but also how to put in place measures now to replace the trees. So I would strongly endorse all of you and encouraging your parishioners and groups you're with to look at the website that Rosie's pointed you to. All I would add is that if you happen to have sites yourselves or landowners that you know who have, let's say, larger ambitions about almost landscape scale woodlands, go through Rosie and Fwag, but the Woodland Trust has an offer that sort of wraps around saving Devon's treescapes, which is saying almost an unlimited size of woodland. We will advise, support, and try and work with either a landowner or a community group to get the largest possible native woodland in the ground. And just a quick call out for Queen's Green Canopy. So whilst the Woodland Trust is 50 next year, it's obviously been 70 years of the Queen on the throne. And she's celebrating by seeking, or to be sported, to create a whole network of new woodlands. So there is an aspiration to get 70 woods of 70 acres. So it's just a call out to say that if anybody on this Zoom, or if you know anybody who's sitting on 70 acres of land that they would like to turn to woodland, I'd be very pleased to speak to them. I'll leave it like that. And of course, the parish that brings it forward will be well recognised. So I'll leave it at that on the woodland creation side. Happy to answer anything at the end maybe, but just turn to Robin now. We were going to talk about community woodlands as well. So Robin leads a group in the Woodland Trust Wood at Penstave Copse in South Brent. Robin, over to you perhaps to explain what happens there. That'd be much appreciated.
Okay, Ross, thank you. So I'd like to tell you about a particular project that I'm involved with in a particular location. So it's at South Brent at the Woodland Trust Wood called Penstave Copse. And we're a community group which comes under the umbrella of Sustainable South Brent. Sustainable South Brent is a registered charity with a whole bunch of brilliant projects happening in the parish. I'm involved in the Hedges and Woodland group. So I'm just going to give you a flavour of what we get up to with our work and see if it stimulates some ideas for you of what might be possible in your locality. So I'm going to do a share screen. There we go. Try that one. So I'll see if this works. Okay, yeah, so the woodland is called Penstave Copse. It's a lovely ancient valley woodland beside the River Avon, with lovely old gnarled trees, lots of bluebells, everything you'd love about a woodland. And it's also got a newer additional planted area at the top of the hill, which is about 25 years old. We've had a project going there in partnership with the Woodland Trust for something like 8 or 9 years now, where we do hedge laying and coppicing. So the coppicing is where the newer section of woodland at the top, which was all uniformly planted 25 years ago. Our aim is to start coppicing and opening up glades to mix up the age structure of the woodland a bit more, to make it more diverse. So at this time of year, we meet there every couple of weeks. We usually meet alternate Sundays. So we were there last Sunday and there were 13 of us up there. And we go up there with our bow saws and axes and bill hooks, and we do coppicing, which is cutting back some of the trees along the path sides or in little clearings to let more light into the woodland floor. It's part of a long-term management plan for the site. So what we're doing is part of a kind of well thought through program of how to manage this woodland in the long term. And the aim is to diversify the habitats. And so the group that gets involved, we get lots of benefits from doing this particular project. So we get all the benefits of fresh air and exercise and the benefits of being out in the countryside. We get the benefits of learning lots of new skills and teaching each other about wildlife, about woodlands, about how to do the practical skills. And we also have the social contact. And I suppose particularly over the last year and a half, with all the restrictions on mixing and movement, the fact that we've been able to carry on working up in the woodland in the fresh air together and keep our social contact and friendships going has been really important and is something we all really value. And we not only do the practical work in the winter, but in the summertime, we do visits which are more like fact-finding visits, social things, the occasional picnic, and visits to other woodlands as well. In terms of what we're trying to do there, the top picture shows an area which we've just coppiced. So there's quite a lot of cut material and stumps there. In the bottom left picture, you can see the regrowth after one season. That's a hazel, which is already growing back vigorously. And in the bottom right photo, you can see the kind of what we're trying to do with the habitat diversity. So we've got everything from open grassland along the sheltered paths, which are great for butterflies, and then grading in scrub and brambly stuff at the side, which is really good for nesting birds, and then grading up into more mature trees. So it's a much more diverse habitat. Another thing, I'll just touch on a couple of other aspects of the project work we do, because in addition to our woodland management at Penstave Copse, we also do hedge laying on different hedges around the parish. And these are pictures of our group at work over the last 2 or 3 years doing hedge laying, which is a fantastic skill to learn. And we all get a lot of pleasure and satisfaction from keeping this traditional centuries old woodlands countryside skill going. And the results of that, the top left photo there shows the hedge which we were laying back in March this year. And the bottom right photo is the same hedge photographed yesterday. So you can see how dense and vigorously the shrubs, trees regrow there. One of the things, the byproducts of what our work is that we produce quite a lot of cut wood, and some of that gets left in the woodland to rot down as habitat, but a lot of it we bring down to our community recycling site where we dry it and process it into logs and then distribute it. So it's actually a sustainable firewood supply as well. I think that's all we're being very ambitious, and we're just completing the construction of a big wood drying barn at our community recycling site, which is where we're going to dry our firewood logs in future. So I'm going to stop the screen share and invite, so I've said something about how the project works from the volunteers, the community side. And what I'd like to do now is invite Ross to give a perspective from, if you like, the landowners, the host side, on behalf of the Woodland Trust. So over to you, Ross.
Yeah, thanks, Robin, and I'll keep it brief. But what a brilliant project that is! How well rounded, how many aspects there are to that, Robin. And I think one thing worth recognising about woodlands is that they are as rich for nature as they are because they have been managed. One of the biggest threats to woodlands, native woodlands in this country, is the lack of management. So having community groups involved in woodlands is, from the trust perspective, a real double win, because it brings the management in that we need, it engages communities, it's good for nature, and it's got all of those health and well-being benefits that Robin's highlighted there in the South Brent example. Now, unfortunately, the Woodland Trust doesn't own a wood in every parish that it can pass on to its local parishes. But from a landowner perspective, there are around a lot of native broadleaf woodlands, ancient woodlands in many cases, that are neglected and undermanaged. Now, some of those are owned by charities like the Woodland Trust, Devon Wildlife Trust, RSPB. Many of them are in private ownership. Now, the Woodland Trust offers advice to any community group who's looking to take on a role in a community woodland, whether that's a woodland we own or whether it's a woodland owned by others. It's not necessarily that straightforward. There are a number of things to consider clearly. The management, who owns it, access, the work itself, but the benefits are many, as Robin has emphasised there. I think my encouragement is to those of you who may have woodlands in your parishes or may know the landowners, and where there's an appetite or a group of you interested, is clearly there will be support there. And I think there are other community groups working in woodlands who quite often can provide a little hand around the shoulder, arm around the shoulder, a bit of mentoring and support. And there's nothing like going to someone else's community woodland to be inspired and to understand, actually, yes, there are things to be put in place, but what you can achieve is enormous. I think I don't particularly want to add much there, other than to say, yeah, Robin, that's a really brilliant little short presentation which covers so much and I think is so inspirational. So yeah, I'll stop there, Jill. Pass back to you in case there's questions or queries.
Thanks, Ross. Yes, brilliant. Thank you, Robin. So over to you for questions. Wave your hand or put your hand up.
Jill, just while you're waiting, I've picked up a question from Jane in the chat about whether our project at Penstave can be used as a showcase. And the answer is definitely yes. If there's anybody on this call, or if you know of anybody who's thinking, interested interested mulling over a project a bit like this, we'd be delighted to show you what we do, or to get together with you and talk through some of the things to consider and the practicalities. In fact, an example of that, as a result of our hedge laying work in South Brent parish, there's a new community group just forming in our neighbouring parish at Ugborough, who are wanting to start a hedge laying group there. And so we're doing some mentoring and training for them to help them get established. So there's plenty of opportunity for that.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I guess that was my question really for Ross, was about the sort of, so your group of volunteers come under Sustainable South Brent, but if there isn't that umbrella for a group of volunteers to come under, does Woodland Trust offer any kind of, it's around the insurance and the structure that they work under?
Yeah, so the trust, there's a whole mix on Woodland Trust sites. I mean, I have the privilege across the southwest of managing about 220 woodlands, and about 50 of those are out with managed by various ways by community groups. So some of them are community groups that effectively come in and help manage that trust woodland, such as Sustainable South Brent and Robin's talked about. In other places, we actually directly support volunteer groups ourselves and bring those volunteers in as Woodland Trust volunteers. And I'm thinking there's a woodland down in Stokenham, Chillington, which is run on exactly that model, where the volunteers are Woodland Trust volunteers. We cover the insurance, we cover their training, and they run as a small group there. So either way could be done. Obviously, it's easier for the Woodland Trust to do it on a Woodland Trust site. I think the Devon Wildlife Trust have a similar model on their sites, don't they, where groups of volunteers can work together.
Brilliant, that's good to know. Yeah, thanks, Ross. No other. Yeah, Sophie, you've got a question.
I've got a couple of questions around, and sorry I'm a bit late, so if this has been covered, I apologise. I was taking a bit of time getting my head around being in the meeting, so apologies. So around the hedge laying, how do you find farmers who kind of come to you and say, I want this done, or are you kind of identifying hedges that you think would benefit from this and finding a farmer and persuading them of it, or how that works? And also, when it comes to managing woodland, how does that work when it's a privately owned woodland?
Okay. Sophie, thanks for your question. I'll answer the first one about hedging. How do we find the hedges? So it's really something we just use our local contacts within the community and work and identify landowners, smallholders, people who've got a hedge that looks suitable. But I think the key things that we do is we're on the lookout for hedges which are good for hedge laying, and a lot of hedges are incredibly neglected or overgrown, too old, too big, whatever, and aren't suitable for hedge laying. So identifying the right kind of hedge is important. And we also have a policy within our group of working on hedges which are publicly conspicuous, like next to a road, next to a public footpath. So there's a sort of sense of a community or public benefit to the work that's been done.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. If I pick up that second one, Sophie, about private woodlands. There are many community woodland groups across the country that work in private woodland. Of course, what you need is a willing private landowner, and you probably need some form of group who can get some form of relationship with that landowner. So I think there are quite a lot of examples of small charities setting up to do that. Parish councils might take leases or licenses on behalf of their community group with a private landowner. Other environmental groups can. But yeah, so there's a whole continuum of community woods that run on charitable land or charity-owned land, right through a whole range that run on private land or even owned land by those community groups directly. I should have said it if I didn't. I mean, if you go onto the Woodland Trust website and search into community woods, there's a few pages there with quite a lot of detail there about establishing a group, how to do management, set up your management plan, and indeed, you know, how to then approach landowners and work with landowners. But yeah, those are the conversations that you in your local groups or local parishes can far more easily have if you know of landowners that might have neglected woodlands or unused woodlands, where they can get them brought back into management. The community can do the community activity and take the firewood, quite simply. That's why a lot of these community groups work, is people get the firewood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to
Yes.
say, let's not forget our contact with the Forestry Commission in terms of the England Woodland Grant Scheme. We should also be considering FIPL nowadays, farming in the protected landscape. And as you mentioned farmers, but as landowners and farmers start to move to new ways of funding, these are the sorts of projects that are helping towards a transition to a different way that we're going to use public money for public goods. So there's a whole range of opportunity and options out there. So I'll pop a few things in the chat.
And if I could echo what Adam said, there is a lot of support out there. We've talked here, Rosie's talked about woodland creation, planting, Robin's talked about the woodland management. There is a lot of support there, and there is a lot of financial support. Actually, the biggest challenge is finding the right support. So organisations like Saving Devon Treescape, like Adam at the AMB, and indeed the Woodland Trust, we can help you often find your way through what's often a really bewilderingly perplexed approach to government grant giving at the moment. But there's almost certainly some funding that will support your aspirations around creation or woodland management.
Can I just say that it really is important that we bang this message home about right tree, right place, right management, because trees are great, but there's a lot of other really, really important habitats that will trump woodland. And to a certain extent, we have to make sure that any new habitats aren't actually going in existing habitats that have really huge biodiversity value. And to that, the right tree thing. When I find myself in the depths of the AOMB, I'll see huge swathes of Christmas tree planting. Not good. There's also people that look at the idea of having eucalyptus as a fast-growing crop. Not good. I mean, we've all got our own version of what we think a perfect or a valid woodland is, but it's people like the Woodland Trust, it's people like the Forestry Commission, it's people within our organisation, South Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, that will look at the local appropriateness of your actions. Just go out there and plant trees, but let's try and make sure that they're in the right place.
Thank you, Adam.
Species.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go with native. Okay, so thank you so much for that. That was really inspiring and great to hear about all the support that's out there and your help to thread our way through it. And we're really pleased to have Thelma here. Thelma is the South Hams Tree Warden Coordinator, and she just wants a couple of minutes to tell us about how we can help each other in that role. Thank you.
I don't know how many people know about the tree wardens. I can see Andrew Northrop there, who is one of the tree wardens with us. We're basically volunteers within our parishes who share a love of trees and hedgerows and endeavour to keep both of them in our parishes. At the moment, we've got around 60 tree wardens in 60 different parishes, and they're all busy working away. Some experienced, some not experienced. So basically the love of trees is the most important, and you get your experience. When you become a tree warden, you can have some training, you can have talks to people that have a wealth of experience because they've been doing something to do with trees for the last 40 years or something, and others that have sort of just started 6 months ago, and other than knowing that's a sycamore or that's an ash tree, they don't know much about it. So one of the things that I thought would be useful for the group you are representing is find out from your parish clerk if you actually have a tree warden. If you have a tree warden, they will know. And then you can actually introduce yourself and perhaps work together a bit more. Because one of the main things that we tend to do in our parishes is keep an eye on trees that are outside of woodlands. So they're individual trees that may be in somebody's garden. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice today. They're trees that are on parish ground, and they're trees that we need to look after. They're mature trees. They're not trees that we've just planted. So one of the main things we do, and you may not be aware of this, is that all conservation areas, the trees are protected as much as the houses. Trees are also outside conservation areas that have TPOs on them, so they're tree preservation orders. Those trees are not allowed to have any work whatsoever done on them unless there is permission. And that permission comes from Southampton District Council Tree Office. When that happens, if somebody wants to, say, lop a branch off a tree, they apply to Southampton District Council, who then send information about that prospective work to the parish clerk of the parish. Not only that, but it's also sent to the tree warden of the parish, who can send an individual response as to whether they think that work is appropriate. And the tree officer takes that into consideration at the same time. So although we're not dealing with woodlands and we do planting when we can, we see one of our main roles as maintaining mature trees, which, as we all know, have a greater biodiversity and also have more carbon sequestration than newly planted trees. So, as I said, in your the first thing which would be useful is you finding out if you have a tree warden. If you don't have a tree warden in your parish, then please contact me and I can make you into a tree warden after an initial chat and finding out what your role, what you know about already and what you don't know about. So that is one thing. So when you're walking around your parish and you've found out whether a certain area is in a conservation area, you can then look at those trees and see if they're suffering from anything, if you think that somebody is doing something untoward to them, and then you can report that so that you can stop them. You can also find out more about where your conservation areas are and where your TPO trees are by going onto the Southampton District Council website on interactive mapping. You will then find all the maps, all the information about TPO trees within your parish, and then you can possibly take more note of them and protect them in whatever way you can from anything untoward. So if we've lost numerous mature trees over the last 11 years since I became a tree warden, this doesn't bode well. We know we're going to lose ash. We don't want to lose any other mature trees if we have the chance not to. So contact me if you want to find out more, find out who your local tree warden is, and try and liaise with them about trees within your own parish. So that's my big request, really.
Thank you, Thelma. Any questions or suggestions or volunteers?
Volunteers would be good.
Julie, you've got Julia.